Hello, everybody, and welcome to tonight's feature presentation on the developer's perspective on the Passive House process. I'm Aaron Gunnarsson with Passive House, Massachusetts, and I'm thrilled to have you all here. We have an excellent panel discussion tonight who we'll introduce in a moment. But first, I do just want to give some thanks to our partners at MassSave who are helping to put on this session and many of the other training programs that we provide. MassSave offers incentives for Passive House projects, multifamily buildings, 5 units or larger. These are very generous incentives, and as of now, I think there's around 14,000 units enrolled in this incentive program, which is pretty incredible. When we go back to, say, 2018, right before these incentives started, there was one multifamily project in Massachusetts, certified Passive House project, around 26 units or so. So to go from that to 14,000 registered units in a few years is a pretty incredible achievement. So for the developers out there, definitely look into these incentives and take advantage of them. And I encourage everyone to enroll your projects right away, even if you're just starting to consider Passive House and you haven't even set yourself on it yet. The feasibility study incentives, the engine modeling incentives, you can start to get those early on in the process. Before you become certified. So definitely look into these incentives, take advantage of them. They've been enormously successful for a lot of projects. We want to keep that 14,000 units, want to keep that growing. In addition to those incentives, they have also rolled out ones for 1 to 4 unit buildings. So these work a little bit differently. They're not based on Passive House certification, but rather some other metrics. So they use a HERS score. They also have requirements for certain electrification steps in the building, which you can see here on the screen. All the incentives I'm showing you, you can find out more on masssave.com/passivehouse, and you'll get a lot of info about all of these. Thank you again for being here, and we're going to get started with the presentation. I do want to let folks know that folks online, that we are having some issues with the video. We should have in-room video of our speakers starting in about, I would say about 7 to 8 minutes here into the presentation. Until then, you can think of this as a podcast. With that, I'm going to go ahead and turn things over to our board member, James Peterson, who helped to arrange tonight's session, to introduce the speakers and get things started. Welcome, James.
Aaron. So Aaron kind of stole my thunder a little bit. Announced that this is a series. Kind of implied that. So my name is James Peterson with Peterson Engineering Principal. And before I go on, if you know someone who has 6 months to 3 years of experience electrical engineering with BSED, let me know. Get that? Okay. All right. So as part of my role on the board, I'm really super proud to be on the Passive House Mass board, by the way. I am part of the monthly meeting committee, which sounds, I think we need a better name. It sounds kind of bureaucratic. Christina's also on that committee. Laura Homich, let's see, Michelle Pigian, Aaron's participates in that. Am I missing anybody? I think that's it.
I think that's it.
Okay, so we're a little committee, but we get a lot done. So next month is architects talking about Passive House project implementation. The inspiration for this series is the notion that with Passive House being a code compliance pathway, we're anticipating that there's expanding interest in understanding what Passive House is. So following next month on July 9th, the focus is going to be on HVAC and domestic hot water, and I'm curating that. And August 6th, nothing, but September 10th, we'll switch to construction, and Ed Sopel, who's here, will be tag teaming with another gentleman, curating that. And then finally, in conclusion, our 5th of this series will be verification and certification. So, and then we'll go from there, see what people want to learn about, want to hear in these monthly sessions. So that's a little bit on this series. So with that, I'll turn it over to Christina McPike from Wind Development.
Thanks, James. Thanks, Aaron. Before I get in and ask my panelists to introduce ourselves, I'm gonna add one comment. The Mass Save incentives are very important. hopefully you all use them. We use them. I think all of us are using them. There's a public comment period available or happening on June 3rd for anyone who wants to read the draft plan for the next 3 years of incentives. It's available online. I don't know the website, but we will send it to you if you're interested. Read it, opine, weigh in, join the call on June 3rd. You know, this is an important plan, and everybody's voice should be heard in the development of that. I'm obsessed. I binge watch every streaming service in the world, so I'm excited about this series. It's a mini series. We are honored to be the first pilot episode of this next Hulu hit or whatever streaming channel you prefer. As James said, I'm Christina McPike. I'm Vice President of Energy and Sustainability at Wind Companies. We are an affordable mixed-use multifamily housing developer and property manager. And I'll let my co-panelists here introduce themselves.
Zoe Weinrod, I'm the Chief of Real Estate at Two Life Communities, a nonprofit, affordable senior housing developer, owner, property manager, and service provider.
I'm Kent Gonzalez with Northland Investment Corporation. We're a large property owner, but locally we're more of a developer of market rate housing locally.
And the three of us are not up here because we know everything there is to know about Passive House, but we have jumped in the deep end. A couple of us are further ahead than others, and we've learned a lot along the way. So this is a conversation. I'm supposed to be the provocateur, so that hopefully I don't get yelled at or ruffle too many feathers. But I wanted to just first sort of share where we're all at in the journey of Passive House development. So Kent, you want to kick off and
Sure.
share with the team what you're working on?
Yeah, we started our journey about 5 years ago, 2019. And at the time, we were going through the special permit process for our project, the Northland Newton Development, which is a 22-acre, 800-unit mixed-use master plan community in Newton. And as part of that process, as you can imagine, there's a pretty extensive community engagement process you go through. And one of the components of that was to meet with a group called Green Newton. I call them the Green Warriors, but they were very smart, very engaged. Betsy's a member, one of our board members here. She was one of the provocateurs, let me tell you. So in a positive way, we were very proud that our project was going to be designed to LEED standards. And actually today it is a LEED certified gold for neighborhood development project. It did receive that, but our buildings were going to be LEED certifiable. And in 2019, we thought that was pretty cool. We met with Green Newton and they said, that's not so cool. We really wanted us to consider Passive House. And we'd never even dreamed of Passive House. We might have had nightmares about it, but we never dreamed about it. So at the time, in 2019, there might have been one market rate project in Massachusetts, the distillery that was a Passive House project. It was 20 some odd units. And here we were embarking on 800 units, and they want in 14 different buildings and all different. There's not a single replicable detail from building to building. Well, now there is, and maybe there are a few. We have some architects in the audience that can correct me from the project. Don't hesitate. But so we agreed to, nobody on the team had experience really with ever doing a Passive House project. Again, 2019, there were affordable projects that had done Passive House, but not market rate. And so we engaged at their encouragement, we engaged a Passive House consultant to come in and take one of our buildings, conduct a feasibility study, and teach Passive House 101 to two teams of architects, our construction manager, our MEP engineer, and so that we could understand what it took to make a building, and one that we were already familiar with, Passive House. So once we had that class, we thought, wow, okay, this isn't so bad, this isn't so hard. And then we expanded and did feasibility studies for 7 other buildings, and official feasibility studies through Mass Save. And as part of that process, we were able to make 8 of the buildings Passive House. And so, and again, this is going back 2019. We were really at the time, we thought we were on pretty much the cutting edge again for market rate housing. And so that was really where we started. We can get into more details later as we go through, but that's really the short dramatic story.
And you're still in pre-development, breaking ground.
Yeah, the project right now, it has 22 acres. There's an historic building that sort of anchors the project, 190,000 square foot historic building that anchors the project, but the site's been completely cleared. We've done 11 miles of underground utilities have been installed, and we don't even have a mile worth of roadway. So that's the equivalent of stretching a pipe end from the Mass Pike to Burlington, Massachusetts. So there's a lot of pipe in that little site. So, and it's a very expensive pipe. We've also had an historic culvert that goes to the site that we had to cap to prevent from collapsing. There are no buildings on top of it. There were originally, and buildings tied to it. One time the site held the largest metal foundry in New England. And we found not hazardous soil related to that, but a lot of, it's like at the time they built that building, concrete was not just free, it was like the more you used, the more credit you got, because there's so much concrete. But if it wasn't full of rebar, we were able to crush it and be able to reuse it on the site. So that was the good thing. So
Amazing.
yeah,
Thanks. So that's where,
It's
that's Kent's
really exciting.
mindset. That's what Passive House multi-building is for Kent. Where are you at?
we do have one building in the building permit and another one to follow. So we're far along in the process. Sorry.
So at Two Life, we've been focused on sustainability and resiliency for many, many years. We're actually just turned 59 this year. We'll be 60 years young next year. And so one of the fundamental aspects of how we look at our buildings is, because we're a long-term owner, property manager, service providers, we do our own maintenance. We don't do 15-year renovations or new construction projects. We're looking at sort of a 40 to 50-year window. We also our average resident income is about $13,000 a year. And so we're extremely focused on our operating costs. And we never want our residents making decisions between paying for food or medicine or heat and air conditioning. So all of the utilities are included in rent. So that means that we're footing the bill for all of our heating, cooling, and domestic hot water costs. And so we've always been real focused on sustainability, and for a long time we were, every project was LEED or mostly enterprise green communities. And then actually right around 2019 as well, we were looking at a site in Boston, a partnership with the Boston Housing Authority, and we decided this was going to be our first passive house building. And actually that building is J.J. Carroll. Delbrook was the general contractor, and we just finished construction in January, and we didn't get pre-certified until about a year into construction, but we made it. And we're now just waiting on our solar panels to get installed and up and running to meet our final certification test. And we are thrilled to be getting our soon to be incentives. And actually the Mass Save program for an affordable housing developer like Two Life is actually huge. It's a really important part of the capital stack for our projects. And we're thrilled. So we have another project working on with PCA. Laura's the lead architect there, that was pre-certified well before we started construction, thankfully. And we just actually passed our midpoint blower door test last week with flying colors. And so that we're thrilled that should be certified hopefully by the end of this year. And all of our projects in pre-development right now, which are 5, are in various stages of passive house certification. I think like 400 units in your pipeline are Two Life units, and we're very proud of that.
Incredible. And so PHI, right? Passive House
Yeah, we're
Institute,
PHI, and we have 3 buildings pre-certified, by the way.
3 pre-certified. You're both are all of your
two-
fees?
Yes, 2 pre-certified, 1 in various stages of construction, and then the others are not yet pre-certified.
Okay.
And I should also put in a plug for, we also have our pre-certified project in Waltham. It's also in the Mass CEC carbon neutral challenge. So please vote for Leland House.
No. Vote for Bill.
It's not good for you.
I'll add sort of a similar backstory there. I don't know what was in the water in 2019. I don't know if you know, but for us, aside from great consultants who had been steering us along the way, we at Win, also long-term owners, developers, we think of ourselves as sort of high performance developers to begin with. We're not code minimum developers anyway. And we applied for the Mass Clean Energy Center's Passive House Design Challenge. And it took a building that we're about to break ground on, so permitted construction drawings, the perfect, like, okay, the worst building to do this for, and say, wait, what if we did that building passive house? And what's the incremental cost? And so that's what not to do, because we'd already, bought the project out and whatnot. But we learned a lot through the process, and we knew we wanted to build to passive house. We also sort of saw the writing on the wall with the way that policy and codes were going. So today we have a couple of hundred units, 125 unit, a single building in Swampscott, that Cranshaw is building for us, and 2 buildings in Shrewsbury that Delbrook is building for us. We're about to break ground on our 3rd project in Worcester, and we have about 12 other passive house projects in pre-development, most of them in Massachusetts, but DC, New Jersey, and New York as well. 100% of our development pipeline is committed to being passive house certified. But we actually haven't delivered one yet. So kind of similar position as Kent. We've broken ground. We are vertical. We've done a couple of mock-up window tests here and there. But we're very early on in the process, and admittedly a little anxious, if you can't tell. The more I move my hands, the more that will be, you'll pick up on that. So I hope you're picking up on, for Kent, there's clearly a policy, sort of local community planning groups, advocates kind of asking for this, maybe expecting this. You guys are looking at it from a variety of angles, somewhat similar to Win. I can speak to that a little bit. You mentioned utility costs. Are there other sort of metrics or factors going into the decision process to say, okay, instead of enterprise green communities, we see the value add? What is that got you guys over that decision hump to go passive house?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think as everybody probably in this room knows, a huge piece of the passive house sort of building design is about indoor air quality. And, we are, given that we are a senior affordable housing developer, sort of dealing with the health conditions of our residents is really paramount. It's actually just truly part of our mission of the folks that we serve. So the fact that the indoor air quality sort of focus of that was huge for us. But I would say also the resiliency and sustainability. We're constantly looking at well, what will happen into these buildings in an extended power outage and other kind of sort of natural disaster scenarios. And we really felt like passive house just sort of got all of those buttons for us in terms of a great building, super tight. God forbid we're in the winter and we lose, power, we felt like the building, we at 2Life have a lot more on our generators than your typical multifamily property owner. But even still, we wanted to make sure we could have people could be comfortable for an extended period of time. And indoor air quality would be great. We learned a lot about indoor air quality during COVID, and it just really, and getting a handle on our utility costs. We used to do things, we still do, put sensors on our windows so people can't open their window and have their AC blowing in the summer. But this was, a lot more meaningful for us than just a window sensor.
Great. I don't control purse strings at Win, right? I'm a sustainability person at Win, so I have 20 developers like these 2 that I'm trying to kind of sell to. I'm an internal sales person, for better or worse. And so I think one of my recommendations, and just sort of trying to tease this out, is to identify those value adds and those the sort of ancillary benefits to the extent that can help kind of get decision makers over the hump. Code goes a long way in solving that. You don't have to sell anything if code is mandating passive house, and we're seeing that right in the specialized opting codes in the communities that have adopted that, which is amazing. But I would just add a couple of sort of tools, tricks. I may come back to both of you on the mass save incentives, but we've gotten pretty aggressive with how we're underwriting utility costs in our passive house projects and really directly increasing the debt on our property. So we can support a larger mortgage payment basically with lower operating expenses. And we can justify those lower operating expenses not with comparables, which I'd love to have, and hopefully we'll see those come online. And also, quick pause, if you have questions, please interject online in person. If you feel like I'm glossing over something, each of these questions could be its own panel. So interject, raise your hands, holler. But the other kind of trick on the utility front that I found to be really helpful is on utility allowances, right? So in affordable housing, especially impactful in low-income housing tax credit properties, as we're doing, you guys are doing, maybe not because you're paying.
We don't
utilities,
pay, yeah.
Right, so we're not typically paying the electric bill on our properties. And we're putting a lot of investment into our building envelope. We're reducing the heating and ideally cooling demand significantly, and we can use engineered utility allowances in our properties. The lower the utility allowance, not the higher the cost is to the resident, but the higher the net rent is to the owner. So we're reducing expenses and we're increasing rental income. Both of those things are not putting money in the pocket of the developer. They're supporting higher construction costs. So I'm sure we can all come up with different kind of examples of that. I'm gonna skip ahead for a moment though, to stay on this theme of sort of additional resources. You said you did 7 feasibility studies?
Well, we did 8. I mean,
8
originally,
studies?
well, there were 14 buildings, but we only focused on 8 at the time. And we had come to an agreement with the city that we would commit to 3 buildings being passive house. So but then as we got more into it and we were able to learn from particularly the first 2 buildings, we decided, well, we're going to go ahead and commit to these other 5. So we didn't start out benevolent, but ended up benevolent. So, and it was because of, well, we were able to make the construction costs work and learn and how to apply this different techniques and different details. And when we were designing these buildings, there would be sort of team design coordination. So the architects, both architects would cooperate and coordinate, right, Chad, right, Michelle? And so that they were learning from each other and from whatever they were being taught by the passive house consultant on the other building, they were all learning at the same time. So that made a big difference. And so I mean, that's really how we decided. And once we learned, again, we came into it and we were more concerned about passive house from construction costs. But as we got into it, we learned all of the benefits. And that's the other driver that took us to, well, can't have just 3 buildings being this good. We need to make the rest of them this good.
Hard to build a worse building once you've seen how to build a
Yeah.
good building, right?
Yeah.
The feasibility study is an amazing tool. It's you get $5,000 reimbursed towards the cost of the feasibility study. And the feasibility study is exactly what it sounds like it is. But do either of you want to talk about kind of who did that for you and what did it do for you? Like, what did it show you?
Our passive house consultant, Stephen Winter, did them for us. And I mean, it really enlightened us to show us how, maybe not so easy, because but how easy it could be. One of the differences in our building you might not see in a typical building is we like a lot of glass. We like a lot of daylight. So, in a typical building, you might be, mid to high 20s in your window to wall ratio. Our lowest window to wall ratio, I think, is 35%. We go as high as 45%. So, and the only way we could do that really was through passive house. We didn't have Paul Armand. Listen, no, Paul Armand, he hates curtain wall, but we'd have a Paul Armand curtain wall in a couple of our buildings that he's very happy about. So, the other thing we did, and I was going to mention this later, but the other way we were able to sort of learn along the way was bring with our construction manager, bring manufacturers into the conversation. So we brought our window manufacturer in very early because there aren't a lot of people out there that can make big windows like what we want. So we had to bring them in. We didn't have to, we did, at the behest of our construction manager. And they were able to continue to work on these details and how they would apply to the different window situations in each of our buildings. So that was probably one of the biggest.
Let's expand a little bit more on that process and the team. You mentioned you were doing enterprise green communities and the Energy Star type projects. There are new people at the table? Are there consultants who became your best friends? Are they the most important people at the table? And can you speak a little bit to, like, as a developer,
Right.
who are you hiring? Why? When? Does that look different?
Yeah. So we at Two Life have been working with the folks at New Ecology for over a decade, and they've been an instrumental partner on our whole sort of sustainability and resiliency journey. And so they've been an incredible partner for us. We've learned so much from them in-house and working with our design team. And I will say, so we were used to doing charrettes and a lot of sort of plan review with the New Ecology team. And actually, I think one of the great parts about the Passive House process is like these sort of, as painful as it sounds, is like these design review processes at certain stages of development. And we're getting a better, not just a Passive House certified building, but just a much better building, through this design review process, I believe. And actually, it's funny, you were talking about windows, like we're actually like saving money. We used to do a lot more curtain wall. Now we're just doing storefronts, and I'm saving a lot of money. I'd rather do storefront. It saves me a lot of money. And we're actually doing a lot fewer windows too, and fewer operable windows, which is also saving our costs. But I will say it's been really interesting working on now, 6 or 7 Passive House projects, and just the learning team from our team. We've worked with a lot with PCA. We work with another architect on a number of projects, Mass Design Group, and just it's great seeing the team and their growth on their own sustainability sort of. Like PCA has been incredible. I mean, going from having a project where we didn't get pre-certified until a year into construction to having a project that was pre-certified like 6 months before we started construction was just like, oh my God, what a freaking relief. And just the capacity that the teams that we worked with. I mean, when we started working with Elbrook on our JJ Carroll project, which will be the largest Passive House building or multifamily building in the Northeast when we get certified. We gotta be there by the end of the year. You guys are back. But I think Delbrook had one Passive House project that they were working on at that time. Now, like their entire portfolio, I would say, or close to it, is Passive House. So it's just great to see. I think as each project comes down, the design review is going faster, the plan review is going faster, the submittals are going faster. It's just to just see the evolution in the last, truly 5 years. It's just been sort of incredible.
Yeah, I mean, if I could just add, I mean, even with our team, there were, the only Passive House consultant on the team was Stephen Winter. And I think one person from one of the other architecture firms from Stantec had just achieved their Passive House professional consultant certification. So it was new to everybody, but I would say now, 5 years later, we have multiple certified Passive House professionals on the team, on the construction team, on the certainly through the architects who are MEP, and even at Northland, we have 3 people that are Passive House certified Passive House professionals. On the developer side, we just hosted an event with Passive House Massachusetts at our at the Mill building to train certified Passive House tradespersons. So we didn't just sip the Kool-Aid. We're like drinking it in gallons because we see how important it is, and the more people are aware and understand, the easier it's going to be to build these buildings.
But we're definitely seeing that at Win, right? So they mentioned the quick pause again. Who in the audience is designing and or building and or has built a Passive House building? So, okay, so everybody understands for FIAs, these design review submissions and the process of getting feedback. Our first couple of attempts, you're supposed to get pre-certified in 4 rounds of submissions. It took us longer than that. And, there's 3, 4, 5 addendums to the conformance set, and, there's change design or change order requests, and, it was a learning curve. The most recent projects that we've done, because we do work with a lot of the same architecture and engineering firms. You know, I think we're actually going to get pre-certified after the second design review submission with PHMass US in one instance. The drawings are just tighter. We don't need to be told again about the comfort criteria in front of our, you know, ground floor amenity space storefronts. We hopefully learned that probably not the first time, but definitely the second time, and we got it right the third time. So I hope that we'll see that play out as more and more projects come to fruition and more architecture and engineering firms sort of accept the normal roles and responsibilities of what the developers are expecting the architect and engineering firms to do, which is to ensure that we're designing and building code compliant buildings. And now that in many cases, for us at least, the Passive House is code, the certified Passive House designer and consultant, rater verifier, their role really doesn't need to change. The rater verifier in the field should never change. They're super important. But I do hope, I'm curious to get your guys' thoughts on this, like, design review process. Do you see anything changing in like the roles and responsibilities of, basically, is there kind of less for the sustainability consultant to look at and mark up and point out as errors, or this is going to get flagged, or this is a thermal bridge, you need to fix it, et cetera, because it's sort of institutionalized knowledge as we do more projects from the architects?
Well, we're going through the PHI process, so we go through an independent certifier, but it's similar. And I think part of what's happened is between the Passive House designer on the team, through Stephen Winter and the envelope consultant, and then the architects, there's such interchange and getting, you know, there's always something that happens in the pre-certification letter, you know, it's conditional, we're doing this or that. But by the time we get that, we've already moved towards that. And so what we're hoping for is an additional pre-certification letters that, you know, there can be a lot fewer conditions, because we're learning along the way how to deal with them. But you know, I know it's a little different than the FIAS process, but still the iterative and, you know, trying to have as few conditions as possible.
Yeah.
Surprise conditions.
For us, it's been sort of as the program and sort of criteria change. I know we've had some issues around how we're venting our laundry rooms. We do common laundry rooms here, and, you know, some issues around just sort of accessing different types of materials. But I do think that the speeding up the process is nothing but saving money. Like, not having to go through multiple rounds of design review is, I'm saving money from, you know, on my architects and engineers. And the technology is changing, you know, where, you know, our first Passive House building still has gas fired domestic hot water. Our newer projects are electric, and, you know, that's giving me anxiety. We're about to, you know, bring a first building with electric domestic hot water online, you know, and you know, there's one supplier who can provide that equipment. And I'm just hoping, you know, it seems like, you know, the world is all catching up. You know, I hope, you know, all of the manufacturers are coming in. We have very few options on our windows still. And so I'm looking to more, you know, more better technology to advance the field. And we'll see. It's interesting to see, you know, sort of like every time, you know, Energy Star program changes every couple of years, same with green communities, same with FIAS. It's going to continue to evolve. And, you know, when we're looking to push the envelope just as much as the program is. So I don't see a day where we won't have a consultant on the team, but hopefully we're just tweaking at the margins and not like doing full scale. Big changes.
I would love to not have 2 or 3 addendums.
Getting pre-certified before construction started was a dream. And we better continue on.
Getting the construction costs honed in and knowing that you're not gonna have any surprises that late in the game is obviously important for all of us. I'm curious if either of you could identify, not to focus on any kind of negatives, but to just be honest, were there any particular design and or construction related barriers that really stood out, and how did you overcome them? For me, we redesigned the podium what felt like 20 times. No one could agree on if we could make the heat trace work in the model. And so if we couldn't do that, then the pipes need to go above the podium and in conditioned space. And can we just spray foam the whole thing? And what does that mean for our embodied carbon commitment? And do we have a drop ceiling? No, there's not enough ceiling height, and the cars are gonna, we can only drive Mini Coopers. So there's the podium is the bane of my existence, and 100% of our projects are podium projects. And all three buildings have a different podium detail. So we're basically just gonna try one of each and hopefully see what we like. That was our way of sort of learning while doing. Anything comes to mind? Design or construction, like trades related for either of you?
I would say, yeah, what's in the envelope and what's not. We have one building where it's a podium and we had a 11,000 square foot healthcare clinic that was responsible for doing their own fit out, and whether or not that clinic, so we were just building the core and shell and they were doing their own fit out, and whether or not that was in the envelope went back and forth, I think maybe a dozen times. I don't know, certainly more than 5. And we finally brought it into the envelope, and that was a decision. And then we're working on another project up in Lynn where we're doing these like 3-season porches, and is that in the envelope? Not. So we're basically creating non-conditioned interior space in the building, and it's not in the passive house envelope. It's a lot, but it'll be great in the end. We're happy that's not in the envelope. But I think for us, I think the biggest challenge right now is making sure everybody on the top to bottom on the construction team and all the tradespeople are like aware of those details. Like, we talk about how people do insulation, and is your plumber doing insulating all of their work, and your fiber protection staff doing all of their insulation? Are we hiring an insulation subcontractor to come and do everything? Because let me tell you, that's where the rubber meets the road in terms of all of those little details. And you can't be cutting a 6-inch hole when you really need a 3-inch hole. And it's just a real different mindset when you go to actually build these buildings, and there's a real learning curve. So we're doing great on our second project, but also that's a 3-story slab on grade wood frame building, which we would do every day. Good, not in the city of Boston, obviously, but I love my salad on grade.
I've heard this dreamy idea of one person being solely responsible for every hole in the envelope. The only thing
that's my dream. Yeah,
I've never actually seen it though. Apparently the plumbers and electricians, they all want to seal around their own.
Yeah,
so I don't
know.
GCs or others. Any design sort of lessons learned?
Our architects made it all so easy. We had podium buildings, and we actually have, I think, 2 of our buildings are technically high-rise buildings. And we have a couple of buildings that have some of them have ground floor retail. Some of them have a combination of ground floor retail and residences on the ground floor. Yeah, and so, but honestly, the team made it all look easy. The biggest problems we had to deal with, and I'm not joking about that. I mean, they had to work hard at it, but they all worked and made it work. Correct me if I'm wrong, Chad, Michelle, you probably made it more easy. But probably the biggest thing is we like the balconies. Balconies are a problem in the type of facades that we were doing. So we actually had to go back and eliminate some balconies because based on where facade had been designed. So that was, not a terrible thing, but that's probably the biggest thing we have to deal with.
This might be a unique example, but I'll just share it before I move on. One of our 2 projects that's in construction right now, we made an odd decision, honestly, to have 2 different sustainability consultants. So our CPHC, who's been involved, when it was a crayon doodle in closing, is not our rater verifier. So we thought we were being kind of clever and getting 2 different folks here, and they're both incredible firms we work with all the time. They can both do both, and we're using them for both on different projects. And there's a couple of different factors here, but I probably wouldn't do that again. It was an incredible learning experience for me because I saw what I had taken for granted, which was just how intimate the CPHC becomes with your building. And so if they're the ones that are saying, guys, Phoenix isn't going to like this, or this is going to be conditional in our approval letter, it's really helpful if that person, or at least their coworker, is also the one in the field and be like, wait, I have a bunch of Teams chats from on this topic, and we sort of divorce the two, and we'll see how that plays out. But so now I'm finding that the people in the field, who's our GC's best friend, they aren't as familiar with the history. So anyway, it's a lesson learned. Hopefully works out anyway. Because we're developers, I want to transition a little bit into financing and cost. We talked about utility costs. We've talked about mass save incentives. I'm going to offer sort of, again, a relatively new resource for larger multifamily buildings. We just finished a project. This is not directly related because it's a zero energy ready home certified project, and it's in New Jersey, but it is related because projects that pursued FIAS also achieve zero energy ready home certification. And this particular project was also prevailing wage. So we were able to use the 45L tax credit. We're a 52-year-old company. We've never done before. And our Bank of America is our low income housing tax credit investor. They've never heard of it before. So two big, national companies suddenly have a $5,000 per unit source on the table that we wanted to figure out how to use. And I can say we all just finally signed agreements a week and a half ago or so that commits them to buying that credit, and it created a new equity source that was huge for the project. So, 5K a unit, that's $500,000 for 100 unit property. So are you guys looking at the 45L credit? Maybe not on a PHI project.
We're a little more boring than you all. We just use conventional financing because we're market rate. So we don't take advantage of any of these alternative financing mechanisms. Ours just boils down to, and I think you might have been going to ask this later perhaps, but we're always asked, well, do the lenders really give you, an additional benefit because you're so green? The answer is no. All the green they care about is the performance, the economic performance of the building. So if you honestly, conventionally anyway, they will take credit for it. If they financing you, they'll be all in on how green your building is. But for the most part, they're just concerned about the basic economic performance. So those are things that we have to manage and make sure that we meet the criteria, while doing all these other extra things. And in our case, utilities, sort of go back a little bit, because, as Christina said, typically the utilities are on the tenant or the residence meter. In our case, the only thing that's on the residence meter are their lights and plugs. Because of the way we designed the buildings with the centralized VRF system, we found it was going to, and because of how efficient these units are, we did a utility study with our MEP engineer, and we determined that because the cost to operate these residences and heat and cool them was going to be so low that we were going to go ahead and do the centralized system, which is easier to manage, a lot less filters to change, and we include that in their rent. Now, is your rent going to be higher? Is our rent going to be higher than our comps? Well, yeah, because we're going to be about 25 years newer to begin with, and then a whole lot better of an environment for people to live in. And that's something we have to really sell and get people to appreciate and understand, but we're not worried about.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Along these lines, I'm interested in the extent to which you think the banks are recognizing the modeled energy savings, whether you're paying the bill or whether the residents are paying the bill. If the residents are paying the bill, are you going to get a higher rent? And will the banks underwrite that and believe it? And if you're not doing that, you're taking on all of the utilities as you are, and you are doing mostly, then are the banks lending you more money based upon a lower model? In our case, they don't, because it's just conventional. So they just care
They don't care what goes into your income. They don't care how you get there.
Right.
They just want to know what that net operating income is going to be.
But at Northland, are you guys underwriting sort of maximum
Higher
rents
rent.
and real?
Oh, yeah, no, I'm sorry. Yes, yes. Yeah,
You are underwriting higher rent.
yes,
And the
Yes.
financing folks are
But not-
accepting that.
yeah, oh, yeah. We can justify it because, well, Noon's a very unique location to do this. The average home is what, $1.6 million. So, the rents that we're going to demand, and plus our site's a little different too. We're not like little one-off 2-acre lots. It's a 22-acre site with, 40% of the site's developed open space. So there are a lot of additional costs in addition to the passive house costs that we're creating the buildings that are being borne by these buildings, especially the early buildings, because of the amount of green space we have to construct. So all of those things are taken into consideration as drivers for increasing the rent. Now,
So
there's a limit.
let's see yeah.
Yeah,
opposite
yeah.
spectrum.
So actually, this is actually our project in Waltham. We have a permanent mortgage from MHP. And when we, Mass Housing Partnership, they're a large affordable housing lender in the area. And when we get our passive house, I'm confident, we finalize our certification, we're actually going to get a 35 basis point reduction in our interest rate. They didn't underwrite and size the loan based on that lower rate, but we'll be thrilled to increase the cash flow when we can achieve that 35 reduction in our principal and interest payments. I will say it's a little bit of a challenge. Like we model every project. We do a lot of work on estimating our utility costs, and then every building that comes online, we're spending a lot more on utilities than we modeled. So we are becoming increasingly more conservative in our underwriting. I mean, our utility costs after staff and taxes and insurance are the next highest. I mean, we're paying probably $2,500 a unit a year in utility costs, and it's just it's really anxiety producing. And if we get a 10 or 15% bump in it from year to year, that's less money for services and programs. So we're not aggressively underwriting. We are also really trying to maximize the amount of solar we're putting into every project. We know it's not going to have a huge impact on our, the end of the day, we're also not owning our PV systems. We're doing PPAs for a variety of reasons. But at least we can, our PPA provider, for folks know what, so we're doing a power purchase agreement where a third party is installing the system, owning the system, maintaining the system, and the PV system. And then it's just, we have a contract with a set rate for our electricity costs. And it was just a much simpler process for us. We don't have to own it. We don't have to maintain it. We don't have to monitor the performance of the system. And we just get a lock-in, a reduced electricity rate. And for us, that was just one way of hedging our costs. But we're super focused on our utility costs. Like we have staff going around making sure, knocking on people's doors and closing their windows and, all winter long. And it's just, it's a challenge, and it's I think a big risk. I mean, we're freaked out about our electricity on our first electric hot water building. We have enough VRF systems where we know we've like 4 or 5 buildings with VRFs, like we know what those costs are going to be, but hot water is
You
scary.
pay 100% of the residents.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
their lights and plugs, everything.
Everything. I mean, not cable or internet,
Right,
but yeah, but all, hot water. Take
heat,
a couple questions from
yeah.
the audience here first.
Stephen Moore with Stephen Winter Associates. I have a couple of questions, but one involves the lending situation. It's a two-parter. Have you seen more green loan folks come into the market, or at least advantageously come onto the market for your projects? And the second question is, with your existing lenders, has the promise with passive house performance and the durability that comes with it, obviously, have you seen any, or has there been a discussion about how that may be favorable conditions? Or
No, I mean,
environments?
they're happy to hear about it. They're not that, I mean, we went, and keep in mind, this is a large project. It's not a single building. So the financing involves the project, and not all of them at once, but it's going to involve, the first couple of buildings and a lot of site work that has to be done for the succeeding building. So it's going to be a syndicated loan ultimately. And so they're again more interested in the basic economics. They'd love to hear about it. We got ready to do our dog and pony show with all the big lenders in New York. We had a whole sustainability presentation prepared to go, and again, it was like going to Green Newton with Lee. They didn't care. Just show us your performance. How is it performing? What are your costs and what's your income? Does your market going to justify the rent you're going to charge? Doesn't matter if it includes utilities or not. And what are your costs going to be relative to your income? But if we do decide to do this deal, we're definitely going to promote how green this project is. So
I tried to tell a big bank, who I mentioned previously, that they couldn't ride our coattails unless they sweeten the deal. And I got just laughed off. Even my own coworkers were like, "What's she doing?" But like, so we should get an extra couple pennies for each tax credit, and lower the interest rate. And they're like, "We don't have to do that." Like, no, go to someone else. So not really. But I mean, we're same bank. Just yesterday asked for a meeting to talk about the greenhouse gas reduction fund that they are hoping to participate in. And we're seeing others, Mass Housing Climate Bank, Community Preservation Corporation, presumably MHP, negotiating with the EPA in real time to deploy billions of dollars at a 0 to 2% interest rate. But a real loan that you have to pay back, and very much geared towards retrofitting existing buildings. I have yet to see terms for new construction, but I've heard that there may be some as well. I don't see that money being used in Massachusetts because it just feels like, and this is not me wearing a WIN hat, and if anyone's watching from WINverse, I've been abducted, but like I don't think that we need it. It's code here. We should build to it. We build buildings in other states that basically don't have energy codes. So that's where we should be deploying that money, because you try to explain to an architect that you want to build to National Green Building Standard, and it's like, wow, y'all are fancy. So anyway, I saw a hand up in the back here. Yeah.
This is a different topic. Erica, was your energy design? That's a follow-up for what Zoe was talking about, since you're so focused on utilities. And electric hot water aside, can you talk about where those costs are increasing for you? You talked about going around and closing windows. Our experience has been like electrical loads. What are you seeing? Do you have data on where those utility costs are actually increasing in your buildings?
I mean, we don't know which plugs in an apartment are draining more than others, but I will say, we've moved to all the buildings. We have 2 or 3 buildings now with electric VRFs, and we are, and so that's heating and cooling, centralized VRF. So like 6 apartments or so, are on each individual VRF system. And so we know that the cost associated with our electric heating and cooling is higher, but it's also we're not paying as much natural gas in those buildings too. So I will say, it's also just the electricity pricing. I think for us more, as much as the load, we just increased our electric load, and then the rates are going up so high. So that's why we're trying to do the solar, I think, PV, to try and defray those costs and sort of manage that risk as much as possible.
And for us, I just sent here's my best guess of what this passive house, and we're paying 100% of the utilities. It's a master development in South Boston, Boston Housing Authority that we're doing. And I sent over $3,000 per unit per year utility budget, and everyone was like, I thought that this was gonna be super high performance, it's PASO certified.
Yeah,
How
yeah.
does this cost the same as the mill building and, you know, down the street from 1850? And I think part of the reason is just because they don't really know, and the peak demand usage and demand charge is the biggest unknown for me. And you can put as much solar on your roof as you want, but that coincident peak isn't going to be reduced by the solar. So we're looking at a blended rate that takes, you know, all of the different components of your tariff and really guesstimating. I do want to put a plug in for, again, something I don't have a link to, but Bright Power has been working on future housing initiative. They surveyed, again, like collected actual utility costs for 300 high performance buildings that are operating, most of which are passive house and most of which are in New York, but it spreads across New England. The report hasn't been published yet, but they have a website and it's going to be made public soon, I think. This is basically an update to their underwriting, like, guidebook from 8 years ago, or maybe more recent than that. But I think that'll be really helpful. We'll see what the results show. And again, I mean, it's obviously varies based on utility and tariff and family versus elderly and, you know, everything in between. Laura.
Going back to the topic of trying to leverage things to help reduce your costs, you know, you have your loans and things like that, but you pay a boatload of insurance on top of that, and there's so many eyes on these projects during construction. The quality presumably is like second to none, like you can't build any better right now, right? So are you seeing any leverage to talk to insurance companies on these projects yet? Or are you still getting laughed at, or maybe some?
I mean, I don't know about your insurance costs, but like ours are.
No,
out
no,
of
no.
control.
Control,
Oh my
yeah.
God.
They're like smart women, I don't care.
Yeah, I mean, let alone just because we're trying not to put the damn solar panels on the roof, it's taken us 6 months,
Yeah.
but actually more than that.
I thought they'd be excited about, you know, non-combustion in the building, and we chopped it around and it made no impact. It's only one example, but
Yeah.
What is the percent premium on the cost that you're seeing on your project?
Doesn't matter.
it's a really hard question
It
to
is a hard.
answer, right? Because
seriously.
what are you comparing it to? This code in Massachusetts, or an Energy Star, or Lead Platinum,
Code in Massachusetts, so what would,
old
what,
code in Massachusetts?
right, if
Yeah.
you. Now we're required to do passive house on multifamily, so what was it before, not passive house, and what is it now, passive house?
See, it's difficult. I mean, and I'm Jeff Craig, the famous Beth Craig, are you out there? She would tell you, she's done studies on this, and you guys know more about it than I do. On affordable projects, what is it?
2 to 3,
2 to
yeah.
3, 2 to 5%.
Yeah.
5, yeah.
I would tell you, and for us, it's not the same. But again, you know, I would point to the windows. You know, you're going with a giant window, and that has to become triple pane versus a tiny window. It's different. So,
Tiny, just an operable part is tiny.
so there, and plus, you know, and this is maybe self-imposed on us in our particular building specifically, you know, our buildings are, you know, with, you know, a lot of nooks and crannies, nothing, you know, not a lot of square corners. So, you know, some of it's self-inflicted. But, you know, it never sort of stopped us. You know, we still wanted as big windows as we could get. So, but I would say, you know, if we were forced to say, it'd be closer to 5 to 8%
Okay.
more. But we think ultimately, because these buildings are coming online now for another 3 years or so, we'll be able to recover that the largest.
It's been a long time since we attempted to tease that out. But I do think we're in the 2-3% range, but we were also never building code minimum buildings, so that's why I don't really trust my answer, right? Like, we've used energy recovery ventilation for 15 years. The only impact to our ventilation was that instead of 70% efficiency, it's 78%, and instead of ducting a single supply, we're ducting that same horizontal duct goes into every bedroom. So that's that was the only MEP impacted item in the whole budget.
Hmm.
Pretty minor. And then on the envelope, instead of an inch of continuous, it became 2 inches. The way our cladding attached to the sheathing changed, specialty products that are not as special today as they were 5 years ago. And then our double pane, Pella window became a triple pane into Samberline, whatever European grade window. But I know developers that have, 5 sidewall exhaust louvers in every apartment with a gas furnace and a vented dryer and a bathroom exhaust fan and a kitchen exhaust fan and makeup air to a corridor. There's no way that's a 2% premium project. It
Yeah.
also shouldn't be allowed by code.
Yeah, yeah. And I would say for us too, we have a finite set of resources to fund our projects. So it's just a balance of sort of like when you're making, value engineering decisions on, this kind of cabinet versus this kind of counter, you just choose where you're going to spend that money. I'd rather spend that money on better windows and insulation than I would on, I don't know, a higher end floor. And for me, like that's a better decision at the end of the day. So, and we're not getting more money from our lenders, like that's fixed. How I spend that money is my choice. And I'm choosing it to spend. But I also, I think from the first project, our JJ Carroll project in Brighton, I think to our project in Waltham, I don't know, Laura, I don't think Leland had a real passive house surcharge at this point. It was pretty much what it just, I don't think, was there a premium? I don't think it was. There was, maybe small.
Talk to Ed.
I mentioned it back a couple of years ago, it's, Christine mentioned it's your baseline. We were always building above. I think that building was designed above already, and I think just like leads, the market's gonna catch up, your subcontractors are gonna catch up. And they're catching up, and it's getting better and tighter, and the 2% is a good number.
The big cost is your passive house consultant that you didn't have to have before.
I was not thinking that.
Just kidding.
Load your design, right? Like Zoe mentioned that we got to design certification before we started construction, and that was because they were willing to go at risk to get us to a 70% set early on, right? So there's a little bit of like gamble there, but you're gonna do the same amount of work in the end, so it's just whether or not you get funded.
How long am I willing to carry that cost?
Yeah, again, really unique in affordable housing versus everybody else. That's
I
it.
just wanted to mention in the data that Greg does share from the affordable housing developments, that was the range was actually 0 to 5%. Even maybe 3.5 is what I remember from certain, a certain data set of 8 of them. She said the biggest increase in the cost was from ventilation. And I'm not an MEP, but and you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like the ventilation not being connected with the heating and cooling systems yet is like the big next, technology change that will happen and will hopefully bring down the cost because you're not gonna have to double pipe everything. So or double duct. So any, help in that arena would be welcome. Looking around.
There's an engineer in here, or somebody who's brainwashed me that it's a couple.
It's also worth noting that the Mass CEC Bev's study is now at this point in time 4 or 5 years old.
Oh, yeah.
And I
At
think
the
it was,
early stage, and we're going through a learning curve. And the contractors and estimators and subs are starting to make more realistic pricing of passive house features.
Yeah.
It's only gonna come down.
Yeah,
No, it's
yeah.
true. I mean, so we had a project which is now on hold, but we were preparing it to meet passive house. And the premium was on the order of like 8 to 10%. And this was at like DD level, so the contractors maybe being a little on the conservative side.
Is it multifamily?
It was multifamily, yes. Yes. Yeah, in the city.
I think that's pricing at DD's,
Yeah.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. Well, obviously things will sort of get dialed in, but I would expect that there'd be a premium on the envelope, and there might even be a premium for some additional sophistication in the MEP systems, heat recovery, that type of thing. But then there might be some efficiencies as well, because you have a tighter envelope and you're,
Yeah,
you know,
the
in
tonnage of
theory,
your systems are
you're-
smaller,
right,
Right.
right,
you're not running a gas line anymore and waiting for the gas company to show up.
right.
Um,
The biggest thing we had to deal with, I'm sorry, real quick,
that's okay.
I know you gotta go.
I turned into a pumpkin, but I've already melted all of it.
A lack of.
A lack of
Talk about ventilation. Yeah.
One of the biggest challenges we had was convincing Eversource we didn't need as much electricity as they wanted to give us. Yeah, yeah, because you have your electrical engineer prepare a load letter and they submit the load letter and Eversource says, well, we're not gonna pay attention to that. We have our own standard. It's so many blah, blah, blah per bedroom. And it doesn't matter what you submit. So, whoa, wait a minute. So this is what we think you need. So, whoa, no, time out. So now we do not need that much electricity. So, and then we asked, you know, Mass, we're part of the Mass Save program. There's somebody from Eversource on the program. So we go to that person and he says, and I'm not joking, this isn't a promotion. He says, talk to Stephen Winter, because we know they've done studies in New York City. Get those studies, bring them up, and then we can prove to them that you don't need that much electricity. So that's what we did. They had studies on buildings and the electrical usage in New York City. We gave that to Eversource saying, oh, okay, we believe you. So and that made a
And
difference.
your electrical engineer, got behind that too?
Oh, yeah, no, well, they're the ones that calculated we need, how much energy we needed. And Eversource saying, no, you need more.
Got it.
So yeah, they were behind it from the get-go. But these studies were what we had to use from New York to prove that based on the performance of those buildings, we didn't need too much electricity.
So I want to ask everyone to sort of leave our audience with a closing thought, but I also selfishly, you actually have people living in a passive house building, and I failed to get to a question. I just,
Yeah,
how's it
no.
going? Are they happy? Do
Are
they
they
know that
happy?
they live in a passive house building?
Yeah, we actually were just saying we need to like get a plaque or something. Once we get officially certified, we're gonna do some more education with our residents around it. You know, to them, it's just an apartment building, which is actually, you know, also good. I will say,
They're open
you know,
windows.
people open their windows. They wish they could open more, with our, thick walls and, 3-inch opening. They're not getting quite as much, fresh air as some would like. You know, we also, you know, are required, I think, I don't know, by state law to keep the heat on until like June 15th or something.
Right.
So we haven't converted everybody over yet, but, so we'll see how people felt today on the 6th floor of the building. But generally, it's the one thing people do notice is it's so damn quiet. It's amazing how quiet it is. And we're on Chestnut Hill Ave in Brighton, and it's a pretty busy street. And you go into an apartment and you hear nothing. You don't hear anything from your neighbors or people above or below you, and certainly nothing from the street if your window's not open. So I think people are really thrilled. We also, you know, have like all like low VOC and, you know, great flooring and all of that too. So people, I mean, when they moved into these apartments, they were literally like, you know, you won the lottery in an affordable housing project. Like these people really truly felt that they won the lottery. They are,
Yeah.
could not be a group of 142 happier residents, which
Congratulations.
we're thrilled about.
Yeah. That's incredible. And also another good example of one of those sort of additional value adds to kind of help with the sales pitch. Our building in Swampscott is, you know, 2.5 feet away from the commuter rail line. And so everybody went into it assuming that we were going to need to redesign and meet all these crazy STC ratings. We didn't have to change anything. Our envelope and the windows that we had selected at the feasibility stage of our passive design satisfied all of the acoustical requirements. So hopefully that's a quiet building. Okay. Can everybody share hopefully a positive, optimistic, forward-looking closing thought with our audience? Ken, I'm gonna put you on the spot first.
No problem. Don't worry about it. See, I will say what you need to do if you haven't done, if you're embarking on a passive house project the first time, engage a passive house consultant and make sure you understand which program is best for your project, whether it's PHI or FIAS. But get them in the very beginning, so, you know, before your architect even starts conceptual studies. I think it's really, really important. We didn't do that. We got them in early enough, we were still in SDs, but they weren't gonna change the buildings anyway. We were gonna let them, they were gonna adapt to us. So it's a little different. Nevertheless, I think, next time we start building fresh, we'll have a passive house consultant on the team. From the very beginning, right along with our construction manager, we bring them on at the beginning as well. So it just makes life a lot easier. Avoids a lot of surprises. So.
Yeah, I would say, we are, in the sort of the PHMass Save incentive world, and we are, we are all in on passive house going forward. And I think agree, it's early to set the tone with your design team early on. And I just, for me, I guess it's not nearly as scary as it sounds if people are anxious. We did feel like it was a bit of a leap of faith, our first project. But now it's just become so routine that it's like not even a surprise. It is just the future. So it's great. And I mean, but more money is great.
Yeah, I would say, as we all demonstrated, we didn't start out with passive house. We've been, I think the first passive house building was probably built 40, 50 years ago. It was probably a second home in Vermont or something, but people have been building passive house buildings for a long time. We didn't start there. So try to be a champion. We're all doing really good and important work. We have a housing crisis, so we already feel like we're doing the good work by creating and preserving housing, whether it's market rate housing or extremely low income housing or workforce housing or rental or home ownership, whatever it is, we're all doing the good work. This is just a cherry on top. And I found that the more kind of consensus building that I can help motivate internally, the more our pipeline evolved over time, and we sort of celebrated the incremental changes. We didn't go from 0 to 100, but we delivered a few zero energy ready homes projects, and no one had a clue that there was zero energy ready homes projects. And then, we just sort of pushed the envelope a little bit more and more and more. And once people understood what a continuous air barrier meant, and that, wait, didn't I already have that? And when they realized that maybe we weren't getting that before, that it's super important to make sure we had that, right? So it's kind of not to dumb it down, but to start where you need to start, and get people to meet you there, wherever they're starting from. And everyone's starting from a different place, whether they're internal, whether they're your clients, whoever it may be. Try to be a champion for it and over communicate. Yeah, that's my 2 cents. But thank you both so much for letting me provoke you into conversation. And thank you all for joining our first episode.
Thank you all. That does it for today's meeting. So a reminder, a month from now, we'll be back with a panel of architects from the architect's perspective. But thank you, Christina, Zoe, and Kent. And for those online, I'm going to say goodbye to you now, but thank you for joining as well.